My fiance makes about $120,000 a year. I make $35,000. And one day he sat me down and told me we needed to start splitting everything 50-50. So I told him that was fine, but if we were doing that, we'd have to sell the cars. For context, I'm 26 and I work as a preschool teacher. I don't have a college degree and my income is pretty typical for my field. I love my job, but it's not exactly the kind of career that suddenly turns into six figures overnight. My fiancé and I have been together for years, and financially things always worked one way. Because he made so much more than I did, he covered most of our expenses. It ended up being roughly 80% him and 20% me. That allowed us to live in a really nice apartment, drive nice cars, and go out to expensive restaurants pretty often. But the thing is, that lifestyle was never really my idea. My fiancé loves big gestures. He loves dramatic surprises and expensive gifts. One day, I literally walked outside and found an Audi sitting in the driveway with a huge pink bow on it like a car commercial. I had no idea he was buying it. It was just suddenly there. That's always been his personality. So when he suddenly told me he wanted everything 50-50, I was confused. But I was willing to hear him out. I asked him if something had happened at work. I asked if money was tight. I asked if he needed help or if there was something going on that I didn't know about. But he refused to answer any of those questions. Every single time I asked what brought this on, he just repeated the same sentence. This is how it's going to be. Take it or leave it. So eventually, I said, okay, I'll take it. Then I asked him if he had made a Zillow account yet. He looked completely confused and asked why we would need one. So I explained that if we were suddenly splitting rent equally, there was absolutely no way I could afford half of our current apartment. That meant we would have to move somewhere cheaper, probably a one-bedroom apartment, maybe even something smaller. Then I started going through the rest of the budget: food, gas, entertainment, car payments. Because if I was suddenly responsible for half the bills, we couldn't live based on his income anymore. We had to live based on mine, which meant selling the Audi, selling the Land Rover, and getting something cheaper. Even date nights would have to change. I told him we could still go out sometimes, maybe Buffalo Wild Wings, especially on Thursdays because they have the 2-for-1 boneless wings deal. I was being completely serious. If we were going 50-50, then we were living within my financial reality, not his. At first, he said he understood, but after that conversation, something changed. He started walking around the apartment angry all the time, not yelling, not saying anything directly, but just constantly irritated. I sent him a few apartment listings online, cheaper places I could realistically afford. He hated every single one. He called them unlivable. He said I was being manipulative. He said I was bulldozing over him and refusing to actually listen to what he was trying to say. But from my perspective, I was doing exactly what he asked. He wanted 50-50, so I was planning a 50-50 lifestyle. A few days later, everything finally came out. I walked up to him while he was on the elliptical and told him we needed to talk. I told him if he actually wanted to marry me, he needed to start answering my questions. Then I asked him one simple thing. Do you think I'm a gold digger? He said yes. That started a huge argument, but eventually the truth came out. We were drowning in debt, almost $100,000, credit cards, car payments, bills I didn't even know existed. The cars were almost being repossessed, and I had no idea, none. He admitted he had been hiding all of it from me. He had been cutting corners on necessities just to keep up appearances. He even stopped taking psychiatric medication he was supposed to be on, all because he felt like he had to provide this perfect luxury lifestyle for me. Cars, trips, fancy restaurants, a lifestyle we simply could not afford. When the debt started piling up, he panicked, and instead of admitting what was happening, he convinced himself that maybe I was only with him for the money. That's why he suddenly demanded 50-50. He thought if I refused, it would prove his fears. After that conversation, I left for a few days and stayed with a friend. I needed space to process everything I had just learned. But eventually, we talked again, for hours, and we made a decision. If we were going to stay together, everything had to change. We sold the cars. We moved out of the expensive apartment. We moved into a shared house with roommates. We started living like a $70,000 household instead of $150,000. Every extra dollar went toward paying off the debt. I took over the finances completely. Every account, every bill, every payment. He even had a budget for buying coffee. It wasn't easy, especially for him. He had always built his identity around being the guy who could provide everything. But something interesting happened during that time. Because he couldn't buy me things anymore, he started making things instead. Little handmade gifts, notes, cooking together. Our room slowly filled with things he made for me, and somehow those meant more than the expensive stuff ever did. And after almost 2 years of living like that, 3 days ago we finally paid off the last dollar of debt. $100,000 gone. We're financially stable again. We're still together, still in love. And now we're finally starting to plan our wedding again. Not a huge one, just a small ceremony with friends and family, but after everything we went through, it feels like the perfect ending. And sometimes I still think about that day when he demanded 50-50, because if that conversation never happened, we might still be pretending to live a life we couldn't afford. So now I have to ask, who do you think was the asshole here?